The wind howled across the endless steppe, carrying with it the scent of frost and the faint, lingering smoke of distant fires. Temujin, barely 10, stood atop a ridge, his small frame buffeted by the cold. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the horizon, watching the herds graze and the scattered tents of his family's clan. Even at that age, he understood that the open steppe was both a cradle and a crucible, life and death intertwined with every gust of wind. Father said the world belongs to those who are bold, he murmured to himself, echoing the words of Yasuge, his father, the chief of the Borjigan tribe. Temujin's father had been a man of formidable presence, known for his fairness and his ruthless ability to command loyalty. But even the strongest leaders could not shield their families from the treacheries of the steppe god. It had been only a few moons since the bitter betrayal. Temujin's father poisoned by enemies, and the clan fractured into squabbling factions. Temujin's family, once respected and strong, was left destitute, wandering the plains without protection. His mother, Holin, had become the anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Her hands hardened by work, her eyes sharpened by grief and resolve. Temujin, fetch more firewood, Holin called, her voice steady but threaded with exhaustion. The wind will not forgive us tonight if we go cold. Temujin obeyed, his small hands clutching a crude axe. Every crack of the wood against stone echoed in the empty valley, a rhythm of survival. He knew that survival on the steppe was not given, it was taken, often by force, sometimes by cunning, and sometimes by sheer will. As he chopped, memories of his father's lessons flickered in his mind. Yasuge had spoken often of loyalty and betrayal, of friends who would stand beside you to the death, and enemies who would smile at your face while plotting your ruin. A leader, his father had said, must be like the wolf, swift, intelligent, and merciless when necessary. But remember, a leader is nothing without those who follow him willingly. Those words had never resonated as deeply as they did now. That night, as they huddled around the meager fire, Holin spoke softly. Temujin, you must remember who you are. Our blood is strong. Our name has meaning. Someday you will rise, and the world will notice the Borjigin once more. Temujin's jaw tightened. I will not be afraid, he said, though fear had become a constant companion in these harsh years. Fear is not weakness, his mother replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. It is the spark. It can make you clever, or it can destroy you. You must learn which path to take. Life on the steppe was unforgiving. Temujin witnessed his older brothers clash with raiders from neighboring clans, their youthful energy and inexperience leaving them vulnerable. At times, he saw them fall, only to rise again with scars that would mark their faces forever. These were the lessons of the plains, brutal but absolute. By the age of 13, Temujin had begun to display a rare combination of ferocity and intelligence. When a rival clan attacked their small encampment, he did not panic. Instead, he observed, waited, and when the moment was right, rallied a handful of allies to counterattack, driving the attackers back with a mixture of cunning and courage. Holon watched silently, pride hidden behind a mask of worry. You have your father's eyes, she whispered later, brushing a lock of hair from his face. But remember, eyes alone do not make a leader. You must know hearts, Temujin. Understand who they trust, who they fear, and who will betray them at the first chance. It was during these years that Temujin formed his first alliances, binding himself with those who had been outcasts, orphans, or wanderers. Among them was Jamuka, a boy of noble lineage, but ambitious beyond reason. They swore blood brotherhood, pledging loyalty to each other in a ceremony marked by bloodletting, a Mongol tradition sealing their bond. I will follow you, Jamuka said, his eyes bright with the fervor of youth. Through the steppe, through fire, through death. And I you. Temujin replied, though in his heart he already felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. Their friendship, however, would be tested by pride, ambition, and the harsh realities of Mongol politics. By 16, Temujin had begun to gather a small but loyal band of warriors. Unlike many chieftains who relied on inherited status, Temujin demanded loyalty, earned through respect and fairness. He shared spoils equally, listened to grievances, and punished betrayal swiftly. Slowly, the people began to speak of him not just as a boy of noble blood, but as a man capable of leading tribes. It was in these formative years that he learned the two greatest lessons of power. Fear could be a weapon, but loyalty was the armor that would protect him in storms of betrayal. And there would be storms, many, many storms. One harsh winter, with snow drifting like white sand across the frozen plains, Temujin's clan was attacked by a coalition of rival tribes. The attackers sought to eliminate the Borjigin once and for all. Temujin, now a young man of 17, stood before his people, calm and resolute. "We fight not because we must," he told them, his voice carrying across the snow-blanketed plain. "We fight because we can survive. We fight because our blood remembers the strength of our fathers. We fight because one day our enemies will know that to attack the Borjigin is to challenge the steppe itself." The battle that followed was brutal. Temujin's band, though outnumbered, used the terrain to their advantage, executing ambushes and swift flanking maneuvers. In the chaos, Temujin moved like a shadow, directing men, inspiring courage, and punishing hesitation. By the time the sun rose, the attackers were broken, their remnants fleeing into the horizon. Holan, watching from the ridge, felt a mixture of relief and awe. Her son was no longer a boy. He had become something fierce, something extraordinary. Yet even in victory, Temujin understood the fragility of power. Every battle won was temporary. Every ally could turn. Every enemy could return stronger. That night, as firelight danced across his face, he whispered to the stars, "I will not be a boy of the steppe. I will be a man of the world. And those who cross me will remember my name." The steppe is a land of extremes. One moment it is calm and golden, as if holding its breath. The next it is wild and unrelenting, a tempest of wind and snow that spares neither the weak nor the foolish. Temujin had learned this truth long ago, but he would soon discover that it applied not only to nature, but to men. By the time he was 18, Temujin had grown taller and stronger than most of his peers, his presence commanding attention even without words. His band of warriors, though still small, had earned a reputation for discipline and loyalty, a rarity among the Mongol tribes. Where allegiance often shifted like sand in the wind, his blood brother, Jamuka, was a constant companion, a mirror, and a rival. Together, they had faced countless skirmishes, hunting parties, and disputes with neighboring tribes. But as the years passed, the threads of friendship began to fray under the strain of ambition. And Temujin's and Jamuk, as the rift between them widened with a neighboring tribe. The Taikyed ambushed Temujin's encampment. Though Temujin's warriors were brave, the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. Temujin rode into the heart of the fray, his sword flashing, rallying men with shouts that cut through the chaos. He led his warriors to a narrow valley where the enemy could not fully deploy their numbers. By nightfall, the Taikyed were routed, their retreat turning into panic as Temujin's strategy exploited every weakness. Chimuk Feren, the words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they carried the seed of betrayal. Temujin had always known that ambition could be dangerous, but to hear it from a brother blood sworn was a lesson he would never forget. It was not long after that the final fracture came. A council of Mongol chiefs was called to resolve disputes over grazing lands and alliances. Temujin arrived with his warriors, confident in his vision for unity and merit-based leadership. Jamuka entered with a larger force, backed by powerful clans that resented Temujin's rise. The council began with arguments, voices raised and fists pounding the wooden tables. Then Jamuka turned to Temujin. "You gather followers like a wolf gathers pups," he said, his voice low but lethal. "But the wolf is no leader. You have ambition, yes, but ambition without caution will destroy you. Step aside, Temujin. Let the noble-born lead, and perhaps the steppe will remember you kindly." Temujin's heart burned, but he remained calm. Leadership is not birthright. It is earned every day through courage, fairness, and the protection of those who follow you. If the steppe has ears, it will remember deeds, not names. The council erupted into violence, and the fragile bonds between Temujin and Jamuka shattered completely. The two blood brothers, once inseparable, fought not only for survival, but for the soul of the Mongols. Temujin's followers clashed with Jamuka's forces in skirmishes that stretched across the plains. Temujin, always the strategist, knew he could not defeat Jamuka outright. Instead, he focused on survival, retreating when necessary, striking only when advantage was certain. He learned the bitter truth that loyalty could be tested to the breaking point, and betrayal often came from those you trusted most. During this period, Temujin also faced betrayal from within his own camp. Some warriors, swayed by Jamuka's wealth and promises of power, abandoned him during critical raids. Each betrayal left a scar, but also a lesson. The strength of a leader lay not in fear or threat, but in the bonds forged by choice, respect, and shared. Hardship. One freezing night, after a particularly brutal skirmish, Temujin sat beside the fire with a few of his most loyal men. The wind rattled the tents, and the smell of burnt horse hides lingered in the air. "We have lost many today," one warrior murmured, staring into the flames. "Some of us are tempted to follow Jamuka. He promises wealth, comfort, and safety." Temujin's gaze was sharp, unwavering. "Then they are not ours to keep," he said. "A man who chooses comfort over loyalty is a man who will betray you in the night when the real storms come. We fight for more than survival. We fight for honor, for the promise of a future we build together. That is what makes us strong." Years of struggle, betrayal, and hardship honed Temujin's mind like a blade. He began to see the steppe not only as a battlefield, but as a canvas for his vision. Tribes could be united, enemies could be turned into allies, and loyalty could be earned in ways that fear alone could never achieve. By the age of 20, Temujin had emerged from the fires of betrayal, tempered and unbreakable. Jamuka, powerful but inflexible, remained a rival, a constant reminder of how ambition could blind even the strongest bonds. Temujin had learned to expect treachery, to plan for it, and to wield it when necessary. And yet, for all his growing power, Temujin never forgot the lessons of his mother, the guidance of his father, and the loyalty of those few who had stood by him in the coldest nights and bloodiest battles. The foundations of the empire that would one day stretch across Asia were being laid not with swords alone, but with wisdom, patience, and the unyielding understanding of human hearts. In the quiet hours before dawn, Temujin stood on a ridge, staring across the endless plains. The first light of morning kissed the snow, and the wind whispered promises of the future. "I will unite the Mongols," he murmured. "Not with fear alone, but with loyalty and law. And the world will remember my name." Thus the stage was set. Brotherhood had been tested. Betrayal had been endured. And from the fires of these trials, Temujin's vision for a united Mongol nation began to take shape. A vision that would soon sweep across the steppe like a storm that could not be stopped. The steppe had a rhythm all its own. The wind swept across the rolling plains, carrying the scent of earth, blood, and the distant fires of rival tribes. For many, it was a cruel and unforgiving land. For Temujin, now in his early 20s, it was the canvas upon which he would paint a new order. Years of hardship, betrayal, and warfare had tempered him. He had learned to measure men not by their birth, but by their courage, loyalty, and intellect. He had seen how alliances could crumble under ambition, and how fear alone could never hold a people together. Temujin's vision was beginning to crystallize. The Mongol tribes, scattered and fractured, could become one people under one law, united by trust and discipline, and bound by loyalty, earned rather than demanded. It began with the small clans, the ones who had no powerful allies, the ones who had suffered under the tyranny of stronger neighbors. Temujin did not simply offer protection. He offered fairness. He resolved disputes swiftly, judged impartially, and punished deception without mercy. His reputation spread across the steppe, whispered from campfires to distant valleys. One evening, as he camped near the banks of a frozen river, a small delegation of warriors approached him. Their leader, a grizzled man named Kassar, spoke first, bowing low. "We have heard of your deeds, Temujin," he said. "Your band is small, yet your victories are many. Will you accept us into your fold?" Temujin studied the men carefully, noting the scars of battle on their faces and the wary respect in their eyes. "Loyalty is earned," he said slowly. "You will be tested. If you prove faithful in the fires of trial, then you will have your place. If not, you will learn the steppe can be merciless." He formalized his laws, known later as the Yasa, a code that governed conduct, justice, and warfare. Loyalty was rewarded. Betrayal was punished without hesitation. Theft, deception, and cowardice carried heavy penalties. And above all, unity was paramount. It was not an easy path. Many tribal leaders resisted, clinging to tradition and the privileges of birth. They saw Temujin's rise as a threat to their authority and plotted against him. On the eve of a winter council, Temujin discovered that one of his trusted lieutenants had been bribed by a rival chief to betray him during an impending raid. He confronted the man beneath a darkened sky, snow drifting silently around them. The man swallowed, trying to appear unafraid. You have the Traz Temujin by the age of 25. Temujin had become more than a leader, he had become a unifier. Tribes that had fought for generations under separate banners now answered to his call, rallying under the promise of order, justice, and shared prosperity. And yet, he never forgot the lessons of betrayal. Every alliance was tested, every follower observed, and every decision weighed, not just for immediate gain, but for long-term stability. One crisp morning, as the first light of sun glinted across the frozen plains, Temujin gathered his newly united forces. They numbered several thousand, drawn from disparate tribes, yet now bound together by loyalty earned rather than demanded. He rode along the line, greeting his warriors, noting the faces of those who had proved themselves in past battles. "Men of the steppe," he shouted, his voice carrying across the valley. "Today, we stand not as fragments of tribes, but as one people. Your courage, your loyalty, and your honor have earned you a place in history. Together, we will ride, we will fight, and we will conquer the chaos of the steppe itself." The men roared their approval, and Temujin felt the first stirring of what would become a mighty force, one capable of sweeping across lands and reshaping the world. But even as he consolidated power, challenges remained. Rival chiefs plotted in secret. Chamuka, his former blood brother, still sought to claim supremacy. And the harsh steppe, indifferent to ambition or vision, demanded constant vigilance. Every day was a test of strategy, of diplomacy, and of the relentless will to survive. in the years that followed. Temujin would face greater trials, alliances would falter. Betrayals would test him to the edge, and battles would rage across the snow-swept plains. Yet with each trial, he learned, adapted, and grew stronger. The Mongol tribes, once fractured and weak, were now coalescing into a force unlike any the world had seen. Temujin, the boy of hardship and betrayal, was becoming Genghis Khan, a leader whose vision, cunning, and ruthlessness would shake kingdoms and reshape history. The stage was set for conquest, but the true test of his leadership, his ability to unite and command an empire, was still to come about and across the endless horizon. The steppe seemed to whisper his name, carrying it on the wind, as if announcing to the world, a new power has risen. Winter had loosened its grip on the steppe, leaving behind rivers swollen with melting snow and plains softened by spring rains. Temujin surveyed the horizon from a ridge, his dark eyes narrowing at the distant movements of the Merkit tribe, a long-standing enemy who had haunted his family since his youth. They were the first test of his burgeoning power, a chance to demonstrate that his vision of a united Mongol people was more than words. Father's blood still cries for justice, he murmured, recalling the day the Merkits had kidnapped his young wife, Bert, years ago. That memory, sharp and bitter, fueled a fire in him that would not be quenched. Temujin's forces were no longer the small, scattered band of loyal men they had been. Through diplomacy, alliances, and sheer force of will, he had gathered thousands of warriors from previously warring tribes. Yet their loyalty was fragile, and discipline was paramount. Every rider, every archer, every scout knew their place. Every command was precise, every maneuver rehearsed. He drilled them relentlessly, insisting on speed, coordination, and ruthless efficiency. "You will ride as one," he told them. "A single arrow may miss, a single rider may fall, but together, we are death upon the plains." When the Merkit villages came into view, Temujin's scouts returned with reports of poorly organized defenses, complacency bred by generations of routine raids. But he knew better than to underestimate them. The Merkits were familiar with the terrain, cunning and fierce in battle. A frontal assault would be costly. Instead, Temujin employed tactics that would later become legendary. He divided his army into several small, agile units, each capable of acting independently, yet coordinated through signals of flags and horns. The Mongol riders struck like lightning, feinting, retreating, and then enveloping the enemy in a devastating pincer movement. Horses thudded across the fields, hooves shaking the earth, arrows streaking like deadly comets through the air in the chaos. Temujin himself led a unit through a hidden valley, emerging behind the Merkit forces. Panic spread through their ranks as they realized their supposedly invulnerable position had been compromised. By nightfall, the Merkit warriors were routed, their villages burned, and their leaders captured. After the victory, Temujin spared those who submitted willingly, but executed those who had fought to the last man, a calculated move, showing mercy to those who accepted his rule and ruthlessness to those who defied it. His men learned the lesson quickly. Obedience and loyalty were rewarded. Defiance was punished without hesitation. The campaign against the Merkits marked more than a personal vendetta. It was a signal to the entire Mongol steppe. Temujin was no longer a rising chief. He was a force that demanded recognition. Tribes that had once mocked him now sought alliances, bringing warriors and resources to his banner. Among the ranks of his growing army, Temujin noticed patterns of strength and weakness. He began to implement organizational reforms that would distinguish his forces from any other in the world. Units were arranged by merit rather than tribal affiliation. Every soldier, whether noble-born or commoner, had a clear role. Arrows, cavalry, scouts, and siege engineers worked in coordination, transforming the Mongol horsemen from scattered raiders into a disciplined, unstoppable force. Yet victory bred new challenges. Temujin's growing power drew envy and fear, even from former allies. Shamuka, still bitter over their earlier rivalry, assembled a coalition of tribes determined to challenge Temujin's authority. The tension came to a head in a confrontation near the Anan River. "You are reckless, Temujin," Shamuka said, his armor glinting in the sun. "You gather men like a wolf gathers pups, but you have yet to learn that ambition, without caution, can destroy even the strongest." Temujin dismounted, standing before him, calm and resolute. "I have learned more than caution, Shamuka. I have learned loyalty, strategy, and the strength of a people united by choice, not fear. Today you may oppose me, but you will see that leadership is earned, not inherited." The battle that followed was one of the first demonstrations of Temujin's ability to turn strategy into dominance. Using feints, ambushes, and the steppe's natural terrain, he outmaneuvered Shamuka's larger force. Victory came at a cost: blood spilled and lives lost, but it cemented Temujin's reputation as a military genius and a leader of unparalleled discipline. Temujin understood the delicate balance between fear and respect. He punished cruelty and treachery harshly, but rewarded bravery and skill with honor, rank, and wealth. By the time the dust settled, many of Shamuka's followers, impressed by Temujin's fairness and effectiveness, voluntarily joined him. Others fled, their allegiance shattered by the demonstration of Temujin's tactical brilliance. With the market subdued and Shamuka's threat diminished, Temujin turned his attention to consolidating the Mongol tribes under his banner. He traveled tirelessly across the steppe, mediating disputes, enforcing justice, and ensuring that his laws, the early forms of Yasa, were observed. He emphasized merit, loyalty, and shared purpose. Tribes that had fought each other for generations now began to see the value of unity under a capable leader. Temujin's conquests were not driven by blind ambition alone. He sought to build an empire in which the Mongols could thrive, secure from internal strife and external threats. His vision combined military dominance with social reform, justice, and law. In doing so, he was creating something unprecedented: a society where leadership was earned, alliances were chosen, and the strength of the people became inseparable from the strength of the state. By the age of 28, Temujin had accomplished what few could even imagine. Tribes once bitterly divided now moved as one, under a banner of loyalty and law. His army was feared, disciplined, and unmatched in speed and coordination. And yet, he knew that these first conquests were only the beginning. Beyond the Mongol steppe lay vast kingdoms and cities ripe for conquest: Persia, China, Central Asia. And Temujin intended to bring them under his rule. Standing atop a hill, overlooking the lands he had united, Temujin raised his hand to the wind. The plains stretched endlessly before him, a living map of possibility. "This is only the beginning," he whispered. "The world will know the Mongols not as scattered tribes, but as a power that cannot be broken." The wind carried his words across the steppe, echoing off distant mountains, as if the land itself acknowledged that a new era had begun. The wind carried a bitter chill across the steppe, but Temujin's forces moved with a precision that defied the weather. Years of trials, battles, and betrayals had forged not just a unified people, but an army unlike any the world had seen. From the smallest clan to the most battle-hardened warrior, every man, horse, and bow moved as part of a single, living organism of force, capable of reshaping entire kingdoms. Temujin rode at the front of his army, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. Villages and distant watchfires dotted the landscape, but it was the unity of his warriors that drew his focus. He had organized them into decimal units, groups of tens, hundreds, and thousands each, with a commander who was chosen not by lineage, but by merit. Communication through flags, horns, and signals allowed him to control movements with unprecedented speed. The strength of the steppe is not in the sword alone, he reminded his generals. It is in organization, discipline, and trust. Any man who falters will be replaced, but those who fight with skill and honor will rise. Temujin's reforms extended beyond the battlefield. He established a system of laws, early forms of the Yasa, that governed behavior, justice, and even the treatment of conquered peoples. Theft, deceit, and betrayal were punished swiftly. Courage, loyalty, and ingenuity were rewarded. Temujin understood that a strong army could be crushed by internal division if rules were not clear and respected died. It was during this time that Temujin faced his first major campaign outside Mongolia. To the west, the Tangut Kingdom in northwestern China had grown powerful and complacent, its cities wealthy but poorly defended. Temujin sent envoys, offering terms of submission and alliance, but the Tanguts scoffed at the barbarians of the steppe. "Let them mock us," Temujin said to his generals. "Words are wind, strength is the law of the steppe. Prepare the men. We will teach them the consequences of arrogance." Temujin's revenge, but success bred both opportunity and danger. Rival tribes, envious of Temujin's power, conspired against him. Even within his ranks, whispers of dissent could be heard, men tempted by wealth or promises of glory elsewhere. Temujin addressed these threats with a mixture of strict discipline and careful reward, ensuring loyalty was always earned. It was also during this period that Temujin began to understand the importance of intelligence and psychological warfare. Spies, scouts, and messengers became extensions of his will. He learned to anticipate enemy movements, exploit fear, and use deception to divide opponents before a sword was drawn. A single misstep by an enemy tribe could be turned into an advantage, magnifying his army's effectiveness. From the camp one he thought of his past, the betrayals, the early hardships, the lessons of his mother and father. Every challenge had shaped him. Every failure had taught him something invaluable. And now, as he looked upon the army he had forged, he realized that his vision of uniting the Mongols was only the beginning. "The world beyond. Mongolia is vast," he murmured. "Kings, cities, empires, they will not wait. They will not bend without pressure. But if the Mongols ride as one, there is no power on earth that can withstand us." And so, Temujin's focus turned outward. No longer was he merely a tribal leader or a unifier of clans. He was an architect of conquest, a strategist who would stretch the power of the Mongols far beyond their ancestral lands. The foundation of an empire, disciplined, organized, and feared, had been laid. And across the steppes and mountains, his name, soon to become Genghis Khan, was whispered with awe, fear, and reverence. The steppe wind swept across the plains, cold but full of promise. Temujin's eyes gleamed. The world was waiting, and he intended to ride across it like a storm got the steppe, for all its harshness and chaos had taught Temujin that power was never won by force alone. Strength could open the gates of a village, or break a rival tribe, but to hold the lands, to unify the peoples, and to expand an empire required something more subtle: strategy, alliances, and the careful orchestration of fear and respect. Temujin, now in his early 30s, had grown into a leader feared for his ruthlessness, but respected for his fairness. Tribes across Mongolia and beyond watched his movements closely, some willing to submit, others plotting treachery. To succeed, he could no longer rely solely on the speed of his cavalry or the sharpness of his arrows. He had to outthink kings, generals, and traitors alike. His first major diplomatic challenge came from the Tangut Kingdom, which he had already subdued militarily. Rather than burn every city and enslave every inhabitant, Temujin opted for pragmatism. He sent envoys bearing gifts, offering protection and trade to those willing to swear allegiance. In return, they could retain a measure of autonomy and continue their daily lives. Those who resisted were met with force, a clear message that submission brought security. Resistance brought ruin. The wise do not resist us, he said to his generals one evening as they studied maps and letters from the Tangut rulers. The cunning seek alliances, the foolish fight. All three teach us a lesson, but only the first makes our empire stronger. Temujin also understood the value of intelligence. Spies and scouts were trained not only to observe enemy movements, but to sow discord among rival tribes and kingdoms. Misinformation became a weapon as effective as a sword. One well-placed rumor could make a hostile tribe question its leader, abandon a stronghold, or even defect to Temujin's banner god in his dealings with allies. Temujin demonstrated an equally shrewd approach. He offered generous rewards to those who demonstrated loyalty and skill, but he tested them first. Every promise of land, title, or wealth was contingent on performance. A chief who betrayed him once would never rise again. One who proved resourceful and brave could become a commander in the growing Mongol army. Temujin's political acumen was perhaps best demonstrated in his relationship with Jamuka, his former blood brother. Though Jamuka remained a rival, Temujin recognized the value of reconciliation, or at least the appearance of it. By offering terms to defectors from Jamuka's camp, he weakened his rival while strengthening his own position. When Jamuka refused, Temujin was ready to strike, but he did so with precision, targeting the strongest factions first, leaving the weak to survive. Ensuring the Mongols' loyalty was tested and rewarded in equal measure. Temujin also sought alliances with distant empires. He understood that the Mongols' steppe tactics were unmatched in open terrain, but that they would face greater challenges against fortified cities and disciplined armies. Diplomacy, trade, and envoys became tools to soften resistance, secure resources, and create networks of intelligence far beyond the steppe dot during one winter campaign. Temujin convened a council of tribal leaders, generals, and advisors. By firelight, he laid out a strategy for expansion, not through blind conquest, but through a combination of diplomacy, intimidation, and selective military action. "We are not just warriors," he told them, voice echoing across the tent. "We are architects of an empire. Every victory must secure the loyalty of those we conquer. Every alliance must be tested. Every enemy must be understood. An empire built on fear alone is an empire that will crumble at the first sunrise of rebellion." The council listened in awe. Temujin's reputation for both wisdom and ruthlessness had grown. Even the most skeptical chiefs knew that his vision could not be ignored. Temujin's strategic brilliance extended to logistics and preparation. He ensured his armies were never short of supplies, that horses were rotated and rested, and that communication between units was flawless. Armies could march hundreds of miles in days, encircle enemies, and strike at unexpected locations, all while maintaining cohesion and morale. Yet diplomacy was not only about alliances and intimidation, it was also about respect. Temujin allowed conquered peoples to retain local leaders if they pledged loyalty, to continue religious practices, and even to govern minor local affairs. This pragmatic approach reduced rebellion, increased productivity, and ensured the Mongols had a stable base from which to expand. Perhaps his most audacious diplomatic move came in sending envoys to neighboring kingdoms with messages both conciliatory and threatening. Those who listened carefully realized the wisdom in submitting peacefully, while those who mocked the Mongols often found themselves facing a swift, overwhelming response. Temujin understood the psychology of fear and respect in a way few leaders could match. Through this blend of cunning diplomacy, rigorous strategy, and unyielding discipline, Temujin transformed the Mongols from a confederation of warring tribes into a cohesive, feared, and respected power. Kingdoms beyond Mongolia began to take notice, and rumors of a new ruler, a man both wise and merciless, spread across the lands. One night, as Temujin stood alone on a ridge overlooking his camp, he thought of the future. The steppe stretched endlessly before him, a land of possibilities and dangers alike. Kingdoms, cities, and empires lay beyond the horizon, waiting to test the Mongols' mettle. "We are no longer mere tribesmen," he whispered to the wind. "We are a force that will reshape the world, and all who oppose us will learn the price of defiance." The wind stirred the firelight in the encampment below, as if carrying his words to every soldier, scout, and envoy. Genghis Khan's empire was still in its infancy, but through strategy, diplomacy, and vision, it had grown stronger than any force the steppe had ever known. And beyond the steppe, the world would soon learn that the Mongols were not merely warriors, they were a calculated, unstoppable power that could bend kingdoms to their will, and Temujin, their master, would lead them to conquest unlike any the world had seen. The deserts of Central Asia shimmered under the relentless sun, their dunes stretching endlessly like a golden ocean. For Temujin, now called Genghis Khan, this was no longer the steppe of his youth. It was a stage for destiny, a world far larger than the plains of Mongolia. Every campaign, every victory, had led to this moment the opportunity to test the Mongols' strength against the fortified cities and armies of distant empires. The Khwarezmian Empire lay to the west, a realm of wealth, trade, and sprawling cities. Its rulers, powerful yet arrogant, had once welcomed Mongol envoys. But when trade caravans were seized and envoys killed, Genghis Khan's patience snapped. What began as diplomacy had transformed into a declaration of war. The steppe does not forgive insult, he told his generals as they prepared their march. Those who kill our envoys and mock our power will feel the fury of the Mongols. We ride not only for revenge, but for justice. And justice will be swift and absolute. The Mongol army, now a disciplined force of tens of thousands, moved with the precision of a storm. Divided into mobile units, they could strike multiple cities simultaneously. Scouts mapped every river, oasis, and mountain pass. Supply lines were meticulously organized. Genghis Khan understood that logistics could win a war as surely as arrows or swords. The first city to face his army, Otrar, was fortified and confident. Its walls were strong, and its garrison proud. Yet Temujin's strategy was unmatched. Using feints, diversionary attacks, and rapid cavalry maneuvers, he encircled the city, cutting off reinforcements and supplies. Siege engines, adapted from earlier campaigns, battered the walls while Mongol archers rained arrows from a distance. Within weeks, Otrar fell, its leaders executed, its population subdued. Each subsequent city faced a similar fate, but Genghis Khan combined terror with pragmatism. Those who submitted without resistance were often spared, allowed to maintain local governance under Mongol oversight. Those who resisted suffered the consequences of defiance, a calculated lesson that spread fear as effectively as any army. But it was not just brute force that defined these campaigns, it was strategy. Genghis Khan employed psychological warfare, spreading rumors of Mongol ruthlessness ahead of his army, sending envoys to cities with impossible demands to test their loyalty, and using deception to divide enemy forces. One city, expecting relief from neighboring allies, was struck by a Mongol unit that had circled undetected, collapsing its defenses in a single night. Even in victory, he maintained discipline. His generals were reminded that cruelty without purpose weakened loyalty. Rewards were given to the faithful, and spoils were distributed fairly. Temujin's meritocratic system extended to conquered peoples, artisans, Engineers and traders were integrated into the empire, increasing the wealth and capability of the Mongols far beyond what simple conquest could achieve. During one intense battle near Samarkand Genghis Khan, the campaigns were not only about conquest, they were also a test of loyalty, endurance, and adaptation. Soldiers endured punishing marshes across deserts and mountains, extreme heat and cold, and constant skirmishes. Genghis Khan's leadership inspired not just fear but loyalty. Men followed him across impossible terrain because they trusted his judgment, revered his courage, and believed in his vision. Beyond the battlefield, Genghis Khan's administration of newly conquered lands set him apart. Trade was encouraged, taxes imposed fairly, and roads secured for commerce. Intelligence networks expanded, and messengers could carry news and orders across hundreds of miles in days. It was a combination of fear, efficiency, and strategic brilliance that allowed the Mongol Empire to grow exponentially. One evening, atop a ridge overlooking the ruins of a captured city, Genghis Khan spoke to his generals. The fires of the camp reflected in his dark eyes, a mix of calculation and resolve. "The world is vast, and kingdoms are many," he said. "Some will rise against us, some will bow, and some will try to deceive. But the Mongols are not a fleeting force. We ride not for plunder alone, but for destiny. Every victory we win, every alliance we forge, brings us closer to uniting the lands under a single order, one law, one people, one empire." In the months that followed, the Mongol army pressed further into Persia, Khwarizm, and beyond. Cities fell, alliances shifted, and the reputation of Genghis Khan grew. He had become more than a tribal leader. He was a conqueror, strategist, and statesman, feared across continents and respected for his intelligence and vision. Yet, even in victory, he remained vigilant. The steppe had taught him that power was fragile, that betrayal could arise from anywhere, and that empires, no matter how vast, could crumble if not disciplined and unified. Every city, every tribe, every commander was tested, and only those who demonstrated loyalty and competence earned a place in the Mongol hierarchy. As Genghis Khan stood beneath the vast night sky, stars reflecting across the desert, he reflected on the journey from the ridges of Mongolia to the heart of foreign empires. The boy who had survived betrayal and hardship and become a man who could bend the world to his will. "The steppe taught me everything," he murmured. "But the world is mine to conquer." The fires of his camp flickered in the darkness, the horses' breaths steaming in the cold night air. The Mongols were no longer merely a tribe, they were an unstoppable force, and their leader's name would echo across continents for generations. Genghis Khan's great campaigns had begun to reshape the map of the known world, from the deserts of Central Asia to the rivers and mountains of Persia. His vision of a united, disciplined, and unstoppable empire was taking form, a vision that would change the course of history forever. The sun set over the steppe, casting long shadows across the endless plains, rivers, and mountains. Genghis Khan sat atop a ridge, his black horse grazing silently beside him, his gaze stretching across the lands he had conquered, united, and transformed. It had been decades since the boy Temujin had stood there, unsure of survival, cold and hungry, dreaming of a destiny that now lay fully within his grasp. The Mongol Empire stretched across vast territories, from the frozen rivers of Siberia to the deserts of Persia, from the rolling hills of Central Asia to the fortified cities of northern China. Millions of people lived under his rule, bound together by law, loyalty, and the discipline he had forged from the chaos of the steppe. The tribes that had once fought endlessly were now a single, cohesive force, a new order that would endure long after his death. Genghis Khan reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the betrayals that had taught him vigilance, the alliances that had shaped his vision, the campaigns that had tested his courage, and the administration that had turned conquests into an enduring empire. Every victory had been tempered by strategy and foresight. Every alliance had been calculated, every punishment deliberate. He had built not merely an army, but a civilization capable of expansion and governance. He thought of those who had stood by him, those who had betrayed him, and even those who had fallen in battle. Loyalty, he knew, was the true currency of power. Fear could win battles, but only trust could hold an empire together. The Yasa, his code, ensured order in a world of chaos. Merit, not birth, determined rank and command. Courage and wisdom were rewarded, treachery punished, and yet Genghis Khan understood that legacy was more than laws and conquered lands. It was stories told around campfires, songs sung in distant villages, and the memory of a people forever changed. He had been a boy of the steppe, a man forged in hardship and betrayal, a leader who demanded loyalty and rewarded it without question. But he had also become a symbol of force of destiny that shaped history. One evening, as the campfires burned and the horizon glowed with twilight, Genghis Khan addressed his generals and advisors. "We have built something that will endure," he said, voice firm but calm. "Not merely an empire, but a law, a unity, a vision. The steppe taught us survival. Strategy taught us victory. Loyalty taught us strength. And history will remember us, not for the battles we fought alone, but for the world we forged together." His generals, men who had ridden with him across deserts, mountains, and rivers, nodded solemnly. They understood that the empire was not just land, but the people, the laws, and the vision he had instilled in them. As Genghis Khan gazed at the stars that stretched infinitely above the steppe, he contemplated the impermanence of life. He had achieved greatness, yet he knew that time would eventually claim him. But he also knew that the empire he had built would outlive him, that his vision would continue to shape the world, that his name would become legend. And so, in the quiet of the Mongol night, he whispered to the wind, "The steppe made me. The world tested me, and destiny claimed me. But my people, my empire, and my vision, they will endure. And those who come after will know the name of Genghis Khan." The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the lines of battle, the weight of leadership, and the determination that had carried him from the ridges of Mongolia to the far reaches of the known world. Around him, the camp slept, horses huddled, and the steppe breathed in silence. In the centuries to follow, his name would echo across continents. Kingdoms would rise and fall, cities would be built and destroyed. But the empire, the legend, and the lessons of Genghis Khan, the boy who survived betrayal, the leader who united the Mongols, the conqueror who reshaped the world, would endure in history, in stories, and in the imagination of generations yet to come. The wind swept across the plains, carrying his legacy forward, and the stars above seemed to watch over the empire he had forged. The boy Temujin had become a man, a leader, a conqueror, and a legend. And in every corner of the world touched by the Mongols, the name Genghis Khan would never be forgotten.